A lot of protesters have been protesting some of the treatment of a lot of Latino people by the ICE agency. And, Black people are under a lot of fire right now because we are not really outside participating and protesting.
I think as Black people, do we feel some type of way about the ways that maybe they have not stepped up for us too?
When we start taking off checks and balances because it's okay, it's the other guy, eventually it will come around to us.
My concern is every time there's a social movement, they want to put us out front as crash test dummies.
We stand in solidarity, or are we just going to parallel struggle with no intersection?
Tia, speaking of things close to one's heart, what we talking about there? You heard?
Well, I'm a California girl, and although I'm from Oakland, which is in Northern California, I know a lot of people don't know distance and how far apart we are, but we're about 7 to 8 hours away from LA. And, LA is just, there's so much going on right now with the National Guard coming into town, and a lot of protesters. The protesters have been protesting some of the treatment of a lot of Latino people by the ICE agency. And it has been chaotic this past week. We have seen ICE agents ramming cars. We've seen them going into Home Depots, going into elementary graduations, calling people into court and then arresting them when they come. Just a lot of devious moves in order to really get these people deported, not really abiding by the Constitution or legalities that people have set forth. And keep in mind, California is a sanctuary state, right? We are liberal. We know that our workforce is heavily impacted by Latino people. And so we understand the importance of them within our economy. And so now it seems like, Trump is just taking and doing his big one, because he's a little bit pissed at Gavin because we're still a sanctuary state. And this is somewhat of a retaliation, it seems. And so people are outside rebelling, and it's really sparking my activism up. And so I'm hoping that people decide to find the way that works best for them. Black people are under a lot of fire right now because we are not really outside participating and protesting. And in the social media world, people are really asking why, and why are we so quiet? But I think that we should realize that, one thing stands true. Once Trump is done with Latinos, who's next? We have to just be cautious of when you lose citizenship, you lose right to laws, and that can happen to any of us. Keep in mind, Guantanamo Bay is still actively in operation, where they can put you in jail for forever without ever giving you a lawyer or a trial, just based on what they said that you could have done. So be very mindful of the democracy that's not so democratic for the people.
Gotcha. And so I guess based off of everything that's happening, right, where do we fit? I feel like you were kind of saying, right? And I really wanted to point out the fact, with you being from California, I feel like that's a little different, because a lot of Black people in the South may not have the same type of proximity and relationship to some of our brown brothers and sisters out there, right? I know through hip hop, rap, gang culture, things that you hear about just in general about how different it is in Cali. So I do get that people from Cali may have a sentiment or a little bit more of especially Black people in particular, right, to this, because, like there's that, right? So that's one. I do think you were also making the point that, hey, when they come for these people, we didn't do anything. When they came for these people, we didn't do anything. And when they finally came for us, there was nobody there to do anything for us, right? That kind of mindset. So I do think that's a great point too, right? In terms of whether or not we as Black people should feel like, hey, let's step up. But I guess the other part to that, though, is I think as Black people, do we feel some type of way about the ways that maybe they have not stepped up for us too? Like, is that a fair conversation to have in terms of whenever it's us, it feels like we're kind of just doing everything on our own and we don't have that level of support? Now, I get one can say that's a tit for tat situation, but I think it's a valid question though, right? Because reciprocity is an important component, I think, to allyship, right? Or to being able to support and stand with a group of people. And so the question becomes, at what point does it make sense for us to stand here, right? So I guess that's kind of what's on the table with what's going on right now as it relates to our community, right? I think most of us are hearing things happen about people being arrested, some people illegal, some people not, right? So that's obviously an issue, questions about whether the Constitution is being trampled on, et cetera, right? With that being said, but I also think when we're talking about looking at it from the lens of Black people, it's completely legitimate for us to ask if this is our fight and why. right?
Mhm.
Because especially when you talk about the issues between just either being Black or ADOS or whatever, like there are some Black people who deal with immigration issues too, though, right? In terms of how we see them, whether we're talking about Haitians to Nigerians or whatever. So I
Yes.
think there are layers of immigration issues, and there's even conversations within our community about these things. But I do think it's legit for us to take a pause and wonder if this is a fight that's worth getting into. And if it's that kind of fight, maybe this is an opportunity for us to negotiate a little bit like, yo, we're going to stand with y'all on this, but we damn sure going to need y'all to stand on over here when we do that. And so maybe this is an opportunity to build if it also aligns with us kind of going against Trump in some kind of meaningful way.
You know, I kind of got to push back against. I understand what you said. I understand what Tia said. I don't push back against anything you guys said. I think my pushback is against the idea, which it's kind of ridiculous because it's how people are. This "what's in it for me" argument, and I get it. The world is transactional. People are transactional. What's in it for me is a common question. However, what we're looking at, there's some things that are just human rights, the way we deal with human dignity, the way we go about our civil discourse, just the way we conduct our lives, they're being disrupted in the way this is being done. You have a federal government that is overstepping the authority of the state government, right? There's that playing out. Then you have what is going under the wire as a more militarized police presence on our streets, and that it's almost Gestapo in the sense of snatching people out of churches, snatching people out of grocery stores, the places where people are taken, and the excessive force with which they're taken, right? Because these aren't armed combatants. These aren't people that are walking around with guns or armor or any kind of gear or even guard dogs. These are ordinary people who are trying to buy groceries or wash their clothes or go to work or something, right? And they're getting snatched by people with full riot gear and guns, and it's there's a level of intimidation here that is being enacted upon America's streets that isn't just federal, right? There's a sheriff in Florida who's saying, you know, when we start doing our roundups, you know, if there's a riot, we're going to kill you. And there is this escalation of tension and violence that took what was initially in California a peaceful discussion and turned it into something else. So there's a lot of dramas at work here all at one time. And I think it gets dizzying to try to sort it out and figure out where you stand, which is why I say you have to go back to the basics and say, as a being, as a human being, how would I what are the basis of how I think a person should be treated just for the dignity of being a human being, however, wherever they are, right? If they're not violating anybody's person. Now, I'm not saying they're not violating a crime because maybe they're here and they don't have the right paperwork, whatever. But they're not violating anyone's person, then they have a right to the dignity of their person. My final point is this: the other underlining undertow here is what happens when we start requiring that everybody show identification to prove you're not an immigrant, to show that you're not an illegal or whatever. So now we're getting stopped all the time to make sure, hey, we're checking down, we're counting down. You know, are we serious we are about this deportation? I mean, when we start taking off checks and balances because it's okay, it's the other guy. Eventually, it will come around to us, and like to Tia's point, there'll be nobody to say anything about it. So, as Black people, I think there's a couple of things that we're weighing out, and here's the argument: A, is it that we've gone through so much that we just are no longer prepared to be there for others? Like we just like, look, y'all let us suffer, we're gonna suffer. Or are we waiting to be the trauma consultants? In other words, we see the aftermath and go, listen, this is how we got over. Or, and this is my real question, are we what are we doing as a people,
We
as a
just waiting to
marginalized people? Are we standing in solidarity or are we just gonna parallel struggle with no intersection? One has power, the other one doesn't. What do you think, Devin?
I get protesting, and I get the conversation that we're having online about, you know, should you guys join in, or, you know, being called out by other groups. My concern is every time there's a social movement, they want to put us out front as crash test dummies. I'm really concerned about that, whether it was, uh, you know, feminism or, you know, pick your other social movements. We get put out front, uh, goes sideways, or things happen, and then, you know, the other group gets the credit back. Hey, thanks, Black people. You know, just let us know if you need anything. And then you know, you call them 27 times and they never answer. Right. So that is my concern. Is this your fight? I personally, listen, you've got these issues, especially if you traveled or you've been anywhere. I think this is not a U.S. citizen issue. I know you guys feel differently. That's fine. This is an immigration issue. So people are, oh, they're gonna come for us next. No, they're not, because you're a citizen. You live here. You're born here. That's a completely separate argument. And if anybody who's ever traveled anywhere, you can't just go somewhere and just start living there. Go to Dubai and just stay there and then see what happens to you. Try it. The stuff you're seeing on TV you'll wish for that. Most places you can't do that. And I think we're all for people wanting to better themselves, have an opportunity. There's a process to it, because if there's not, you got two conflicting things. We have a lot of, social programs, a lot of things that the government funds, and we can't fund it for the entire world. So you can either have a welfare system or benefits, or you can have just unchecked immigration. You can have one or the other. You can't have both. I lived in California for a while. Like, we have a housing crisis right out there. These people, they're living somewhere. Those are houses that would be for citizens that are being taken up by non-citizens right now.
Okay, hold on.
So,
Well, I feel like we're going
Well,
a different lane with that to a certain
yeah,
extent. I'm sorry, right?
yeah,
It's supposed to be a quick take, right? But I do want to say this though, because what I think what you're speaking to, Delvin, is that Black people, or just any person, has the right to be strategic,
yeah,
right? And
yeah.
to think about where they want to deploy their resources in for a cause or not, right? And I also think reciprocity is important, right?